Ryan Cooper, 22, and Jason Reed, 18, walked into the Los Angeles County courtroom with cold arrogance, smirking as they faced the family of the girl they brutally murdered, Sarah Miller. Confident that their youth and the media spotlight would shield them, they treated the trial like a stage, where death was turned into a performance for a curious crowd. But the testimony that stunned the nation didn't come from the police or forensic experts. It came from the mouths of the killers themselves, who had prayed with their victim before pulling the trigger. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. On the night of July 5, 2008, the salty Ventura sea breeze swept through the palm trees along Harbor Boulevard. In a small apartment near the port, Sarah Miller, a 22-year-old honors student at the University of California, Santa Barbara, sat at her desk. She had declined an invitation to watch fireworks with friends, saying she needed to finish studying for her summer exams. Sarah lived alone, her life simple and tidy. Photos on the wall captured her volunteer trips to Ecuador, her smile as bright as the western sun. In another corner of the city, at 1:40 a.m., Ryan Cooper and Jason Reed cruised slowly through a quiet neighborhood in an old black pickup truck. They stopped in front of Sarah's apartment. Ryan knocked on the door, calmly asking for directions to Freeway 101, while Jason stood behind, hand hidden in his hoodie pocket. As Sarah cracked the door open, a glint of metal flashed. The soft click of a gun being cocked echoed coldly. They forced her into the truck, the barrel pressed against her back. "Just cooperate, and you'll be fine," Ryan said, his voice almost cheerful. The pickup pulled away from the complex, heading toward downtown. On the way, Sarah was forced to withdraw cash at a 24-hour ATM on Main Street. Trembling, she entered her PIN, as Ryan stood close behind, staring directly into the security camera with a confident, chilling smile, as if daring the world. After withdrawing a few $100s, he tossed her wallet onto the back seat and told Jason to drive toward the coast. The salt-laced wind blew fiercely as they stopped at an empty lot, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The water was pitch black, the moonlight shimmering faintly on the waves. Sarah pleaded, her voice breaking, "Please don't hurt me. I won't say anything." Ryan laughed, raising the gun. "Relax," he whispered. "It'll be quick." 5 shots tore through the night. The sound blended with the waves, then vanished, as if it never existed. The truck's engine roared to life, leaving tire tracks etched in the sand. At 6 a.m., as the sun rose, painting the Ventura Sea bronze, a middle-aged jogger stopped when he noticed an odd shape on the sand. He approached. It was the body of a young woman, hair disheveled, face turned skyward, eyes slightly open, as if still stunned by what had happened. He froze for a few seconds, then pulled out his phone and dialed 911. On the other end, the dispatcher asked, "What's happening, sir?" He replied, voice trembling, "I think I just found someone dead." Out at sea, the waves kept rolling, as if the ocean was unaware that last night, a piece of the town's humanity had been swept away forever. Less than 20 minutes later, police sirens pierced the foggy morning. Ventura Beach, usually filled with tourists' laughter, was now sealed off with yellow tape. The female body lay face up, left arm bent unnaturally, blood pooling in dark streaks around her shoulders and chest. No phone, no wallet, no ID, just a silver bracelet engraved with Sarah glinting in the early sunlight. A technician knelt to collect numbered 9mm shell casings, while another documented large men's shoe prints and truck tire tracks leading to a nearby path. No signs of a struggle, no drag marks, suggesting the victim was subdued and shot on the spot. The faint smell of gunpowder lingered on the damp sand, a scent only those familiar with death would recognize. Ventura police immediately cordoned off the Harbor Boulevard coastline. Lieutenant Paul Hammond, overseeing the scene, stood silently as the young woman's body was covered with a white sheet. His face tense, hands clenched, as if holding on to his last shred of composure. "This isn't a typical robbery," he said quietly. "This is the kind of killing meant to be remembered." In the distance, a few locals gathered behind the barriers, staring at the sand, where just hours earlier, people watched the sunrise in this peaceful town. Meanwhile, at the Main Street apartment, Rachel Morgan, Sarah's roommate, returned after spending the night at her boyfriend's. The door was slightly ajar, the living room light on, Sarah's laptop open, and a cold coffee mug sat next to an unfinished notebook. Rachel called out, but got no response. She checked her phone. No texts, no calls. Her gut screamed something was wrong. By 8 a.m., Rachel was at the Ventura police station, voice shaking. "My friend, Sarah Miller. She's gone." The desk officer took notes. But as he finished, the radio crackled, "Unidentified female body found at Harbor Boulevard Beach." No one spoke, but the officer's eyes shifted. By noon, Rachel was asked to identify the body. When the sheet was pulled back, she nearly collapsed. "That's Sarah," she sobbed. "That's her, with the bracelet I gave her for her birthday." News spread like wildfire. Hours later, the Ventura Star's front page blared. University of California student shot dead near Harbor Boulevard. In Santa Barbara, 40 miles north, Margaret Miller, Sarah's mother, was setting the breakfast table when the phone rang. The officer's voice was low and halting. She didn't recall much of what was said, only the sound of her coffee mug shattering, liquid pooling on the hardwood floor. Sarah, her only child, her pride, her hope, was gone in the night. Neighbors heard a guttural scream echo from the small house at the end of Olive Street. That afternoon, Ventura police held an emergency meeting. They had little 5 shell casings, truck tire tracks, men's shoe prints, and no witnesses. A technician reported, no signs of assault. Wallet and phone missing. Hammond frowned. If it was a robbery, why 5 shots? Why leave the body in plain sight? Silence fell. No one had answers. That evening, while reviewing the victim's bank records, a technician spotted an unusual transaction at 2:10 a.m., a $400 withdrawal from an ATM 3 miles from the scene. "They forced her to withdraw the money," Hammond said, his voice low. "And that camera must have caught something." A team was dispatched to First Ventura Bank to pull the footage. Meanwhile, Ventura sank into a heavy silence. Beachside shops closed early. Residents eyed each other warily. On the evening news, Sarah's graduation photo aired, a radiant face, kind eyes, paired with the anchor's words. "California mourns a dedicated student, her life stolen by a brutal hand." At UCSB's campus, hundreds of students gathered, lighting candles, placing flowers, and taping up a handwritten sign, "Rest in peace, Sarah. We will find who did this." Night fell again. In the police station, the computer screen's white glow reflected on Hammond's weary face. He studied the crime scene photo, then the timeline on the whiteboard. 1:30, victim left home. 2:10, ATM withdrawal. 2:15, phone signal lost. 6 o'clock, body found. At the bottom, he scrawled in red, "Not robbery, not revenge, just evil." The next morning, First Ventura Bank's footage arrived. In a small, brightly lit room, 4 investigators huddled around a computer as the ATM video played. The grainy image was clear enough. Sarah Miller withdrawing cash, shoulders hunched, face lowered, as if suppressing fear. Behind her, 2 figures stood so close, their breath seemed to graze her shoulders. The taller one, in a black hoodie, leaned toward the ATM screen, while the other, tall, short hair, faced the camera directly. In that moment, he raised his hand in a peace sign and smiled. The smile lasted less than a second, but froze the room. No one spoke. Only the hum of the computer and the cold blast of the air conditioner filled the silence. Hammond muttered, almost to himself, "God, he's smiling." They replayed the footage, pausing on the smiling man's right hand. His wrist bore a faint tattoo, a few dark, jagged lines forming the letters R and C. The technician zoomed in, adjusting contrast. The image sharpened, a snake coiled around the initials RC. Hammond jotted in his notebook, "Tattoo right wrist, letters RC." That afternoon, Ventura police sent the image to the federal crime database and nearby precincts. They didn't wait long. By evening, initial matches linked the RC tattoo to a prior assault offender in Oxnard, Ryan Cooper, 22. A name emerged on the investigation board, paired with an old mugshot, pale gray eyes, sharp cheekbones, and just like in the video. A slight, careless smile. When police announced they had a lid, the media pounced. Evening News aired the 10-second ATM clip. Sarah trembling at the machine, the killer smirking behind her, became a symbol of horror. Ventura and California reeled. KABC's broadcast opened with a grave anchor. A smile, the evidence that chilled a state. Who is the young man grinning just before pulling the trigger? From then on, newspapers, blogs, and TV stations dubbed them the smiling killers. Over days, the ATM footage dominated headlines. Behavioral experts on TV analyzed the smile. Some called it a sign of thrill, others defiance. On social media, thousands of angry comments flooded in. UCSB students plastered posters across campus, "Find them before they smile again." While the media raged, investigators quietly traced the truck near the ATM. Traffic cameras at Main Street and Harbor Boulevard showed a black Ford F-150 leaving the area at 2:17 a.m., minutes after the transaction. The license plate was blurred by glare, but the system caught the first characters, 6KX. Cross-referenced with Oxnard's truck registrations, only 3 matched. One belonged to Amanda Cooper, 29, a Ventura resident. When police knocked on Amanda's door that afternoon, she was stunned. "That truck?" she asked. "I lent it to my brother last week for a side job." When asked his name, she answered without hesitation, "Ryan Cooper." The room fell silent. The officer beside her glanced at his partner, noting in the report, confirmed, "Suspect's sister owns the vehicle used in the crime." That night, Ventura and Oxnard police issued a warrant for Ryan Cooper and an unidentified accomplice. Phone records and witnesses confirmed Ryan often hung out with Jason Reed, 18, an old friend from juvenile detention. Both had prior arrests for assault and petty theft, but were released early due to their age. This time, they had crossed every line. News of Ryan and Jason as suspects spread so fast that by morning, their faces blanketed California TV. Headlines screamed, "The Smiling Killers, 2 Ventura youths wanted." In coffee shops, locals whispered, eyeing each other uneasily, those 2 could be anywhere, sitting in the next car, smiling at someone on the street. Lieutenant Hammond stared out his office window at the sunlit boulevard, haunted by Ryan's grin in the ATM footage. He knew that calm, terrifying indifference, the look of someone who no longer saw a line between life and death. "He's not afraid," he told his assistant. "He wanted us to see him, wanted the world to see him." From that moment, the manhunt began. Checkpoints lined Freeway 101, police inspecting every black F-150 in the area. The killer's mugshots reached every patrol unit. 2 days after the warrant, Oxnard held its breath. The coastal city's narrow streets baked under harsh sunlight as police quietly surrounded an old apartment complex on Magnolia Street. On July 9, 2008, at 4:20 a.m., 3 patrol cars stopped at a 3-story building, lights off but shadows flickering behind a second-floor window. Lieutenant Hammond signaled for silence, gripping his radio. He knew Ryan Cooper, the man who smiled at the ATM, was hiding in his rented apartment. An officer knocked, voice firm through the megaphone, "Ryan Cooper, Ventura Police, open the door and put your hands up." For a moment, silence. Then a young, raspy voice called back, calm, "Yeah, give me a second." The door cracked open, and Ryan stepped out in a wrinkled gray t-shirt, hands raised, face fearless. As Hammond cuffed him and read his Miranda rights, Ryan smirked, "You got the right guy," then laughed. The same smile the nation had seen. Inside the apartment, police found a black hoodie, a 9mm Glock hidden under a mattress, and sand-crusted Nike shoes. The living room was a mess, but on the table sat a neatly stacked newspaper with Ryan's face and the headline, "The Smiling Killers." He likely knew he'd become infamous and relished it. As they led him to the car, neighbors watched, cameras trained on his face. He tilted his head, smiling, the sunlight catching his eyes like he was stepping onto a stage. The search for Jason Reed, 18, continued. Leads pointed to Bakersfield, where he frequented old friends at a cheap motel off Highway 99. On July 10, police stormed room 23 at the Sunrise Inn. Jason sat on the bed, holding a soda can, watching a morning news segment about his own case. The broadcast showed Ryan's arrest in Oxnard. Jason glanced up, then at the officer aiming a gun at him, and asked dryly, "Am I on TV yet?" No resistance, no panic. He stood, raised his hands, and flashed a faint smile. An officer later recalled, "That kid acted like we'd just invited him to a talk show." As Jason was led out, reporters waited. Camera flashes erupted, capturing the two young killers grinning like actors at a premiere. They didn't cover their faces or bow their heads. That evening's news declared, "The two suspects in Sarah Miller's murder are in custody." But their smiles sent chills across the nation. The Ventura police interrogation room was cold and eerily quiet. A metal table, two chairs, and pale fluorescent light cast shadows on Ryan Cooper's face, his gray eyes distant, mouth curled in a faint smirk, as if he were at a media interview, not a murder investigation. When asked if he wanted a lawyer, Ryan scoffed, "I don't need a lawyer, I'm smarter than you guys." His voice dripped with arrogance, each word drawn out, as if he controlled the room. "If I want, I can tell you everything or nothing at all," he added, spinning the cuffs on his wrist like a toy. Behind the one-way glass, Lieutenant Hammond and Prosecutor Linda Monroe watched. They'd seen hundreds of criminals, but few exuded this strange energy, cold yet confident, as if Ryan savored every second in that room. "He's not afraid," Hammond murmured. "He thinks he's playing a game with us." Monroe, eyes fixed on the monitor, replied softly, "He'll learn where this game ends." In the next room, Jason Reed sat with arms crossed, head tilted back, a slight smile on his lips. For nearly an hour, he said less than 5 sentences. Every question, from who fired the gun to why Sarah Miller, met a blank stare and a mocking grin. When an investigator asked, "Are you scared?" Jason shrugged, "No, I'm bored." In the interrogation log, an officer scrawled in red, "No signs of fear or remorse." Ryan recounted the murder like it was a casual night out. He described driving around Ventura, looking for someone interesting. He referred to Sarah by her first name, with no respect, calling her obedient, boringly nice. When Hammond asked, "Why kill her?" Ryan tilted his head, his eyes glinting with brief excitement. "I don't know, I just wanted to see what happened when she realized there was no way out." His smile faded but lingered, a smile that saw death as an experiment. As she left the interrogation room, Monroe strode into the main office and placed the file on the desk. "No doubt about it," she said. "First-degree murder, kidnapping, armed robbery. They did it deliberately and without remorse." An assistant prosecutor started to ask if their youth should be considered. But Monroe cut in, "Age doesn't erase evil, and this evil is crystal clear." Outside, the media storm raged on. Newspapers from Los Angeles, San Diego, to San Francisco competed for coverage. The Los Angeles Times ran the headline, "The Smiling Killers, when two young men turned crime into entertainment." Californians split into two camps, one demanding the death penalty, the other calling for psychiatric evaluations. But whichever side they took, everyone talked about the smile. From coffee shops, to classrooms, to late-night talk shows, the names Ryan Cooper and Jason Reed were everywhere, as if they'd been crowned the twisted icons of a lost generation. On July 14th, at the prosecutor's press conference, Monroe stood before dozens of cameras. Her face was stern, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "We will charge the two suspects, Ryan Cooper and Jason Reed, with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and armed robbery. The evidence we have is strong enough to prove this wasn't a spontaneous act, but a calculated crime." A reporter asked, "Ma'am, could they face the death penalty?" Monroe looked straight into the camera. "I won't speculate, but I can promise justice will reclaim the voice they stole." The case was sent to the Los Angeles County Courthouse, where Judge Robert Hayes, known for his stern demeanor, was assigned to preside. He quickly reviewed the indictment and signed below the line. Public trial scheduled for 2010, Los Angeles Superior Court. His name became the one both defendants would soon face, with no escape. Meanwhile, at the county jail, Ryan and Jason were held separately to avoid attention. A guard reported that Ryan was talkative, even friendly, requesting pen and paper to write his story. Jason, on the other hand, spent hours staring at the ceiling, smiling to himself. Once, when a guard asked if he felt regret, he replied, "People are talking about me, that's enough." The media fanned the flames of outrage. UCSB student groups organized marches, carrying signs reading "Justice for Sarah." They lit candles along Harbor Boulevard, the road where Sarah fell, and sang memorial songs. That night, hundreds of candles cast a glow on the sea, reflecting like souls looking down. In the prosecutor's office, Monroe reviewed the interrogation tapes again. At the 42-second mark, Ryan looked up, smiling directly at the camera. She slowed the footage, studying that smile, arrogant, cold as steel. Closing the file, she said to Hammond, "They want to be remembered for this smile. So let history remember them, not as icons, but as a warning." By month's end, when Judge Hayes signed the detention order and set the public trial date, KABC's Evening News opened with bold red text, "California awaits the trial of the century for the smiling killers." In Ventura's darkness, residents still recalled the sound of waves and the smile on the ATM screen. Two opposing echoes that evoked the same feeling. Peace died on the night of July 5th, and since then, the entire state was counting down to see justice answer in its own silence. In March 2010, over a year and a half after that horrific night in Ventura, the Los Angeles County Superior Court was packed. The first morning of the Smiling Killers trial unfolded under California's blazing sun, but inside the courtroom, the air was thick and stifling. Hundreds crowded the hallways. TV stations set up cameras. Reporters scribbled furiously. When the doors opened, Ryan Cooper and Jason Reed entered, hands still cuffed, wearing crisp gray suits, hair neatly trimmed. They didn't bow their heads. As camera flashes erupted, both smiled, the familiar smile plastered across newspapers for over a year. Reporters whispered, "They're walking into court like it's a movie premiere." At the front, lead prosecutor Linda Monroe arranged her nearly 2,000-page file. Her eyes were calm but piercing, the gaze of someone who'd spent 18 months chasing justice for a girl she never met. Beside her was Lieutenant Hammond, still carrying the crime scene photo in his pocket as a reminder of why he stayed up late. Judge Robert Hayes, tall with silver hair, struck his gavel 3 times. "The People's Court of California opens the trial of People versus Cooper and Reed," he declared. The sound of keyboards and murmurs ceased. The courtroom fell silent, save for the faint scratching of pens on paper. Ryan sat on the left defendant's chair, smiling faintly, eyes locked on the jury. Jason, younger, leaned on the table, tapping his fingers as if counting tedious seconds. When a reporter snapped a photo, he glanced at the lens and gave a tight-lipped smile. A journalist whispered, "They're smiling like they're branding themselves." Prosecutor Monroe stood, her voice low but clear. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case isn't just about 2 young men who killed. It's about the emptiness of conscience, about those who kill to see how it feels. And when they were done, they liked it." She paused, scanning the room, every eye, every breath frozen. Sarah Miller wasn't killed out of hate or for money. She was killed for the curiosity of evil, because 2 people wanted to know what it felt like to play God. In the front row, Margaret Miller, Sarah's mother, sat still, clutching a rosary. She didn't cry or tremble. Light from the window reflected off her haggard face. Each time Monroe said Sarah's name, she lowered her head slightly, gripping the beads tighter. Hammond, seated behind, noticed her trembling hands, but saw no tears. The defense attorney stood, attempting a calm tone. "Your Honor, we don't deny the gravity of this case. But my clients, young men, were swayed by circumstance, by environment, and didn't foresee the consequences. Jason let out a soft, dry chuckle, drawing a few turned heads from the gallery. That afternoon, Monroe played the iconic ATM video before the court. The dim courtroom light left only the screen visible. Sarah at the ATM, hands trembling, with Ryan and Jason behind her. When Ryan faced the camera, raised his hand in a peace sign, and smiled, murmurs erupted. Margaret closed her eyes, her fingers drawing blood around the rosary. Monroe stopped the video and faced the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment a human being was robbed of her right to live, and the perpetrators posed for it. At the defense table, Ryan leaned over, whispering something that made Jason laugh. The courtroom froze. Judge Hayes slammed his gavel. Silence, but Jason's smile lingered, his glance at the prosecution as if to say, "We're still winning because you're watching." Outside the hallway, people gathered behind metal barriers, holding "Justice for Sarah" signs. They watched on small screens mounted nearby. When they saw the defendant's smiles, a middle-aged woman cried out, "They're not human. Humans don't smile like that." The next morning, the Los Angeles Superior Court was packed again. Morning light filtered through tall glass windows, casting long streaks across the dark wood walls. The air felt denser, every breath heavier. At the defense table, Ryan Cooper and Jason Reed entered with ease. Ryan adjusted his suit jacket, scanning the crowd of reporters. Jason yawned lightly, then flashed a small smile when he noticed a camera aimed at him. Prosecutor Linda Monroe stood, her voice steady, resonating through the room. "Your Honor, today we will review undeniable evidence, the moment these individuals turned a young woman's life into a game." She signaled the technician. The lights dimmed, and the large screen lit up. The ATM video appeared, slightly grainy but clear. Sarah Miller stood close to the machine, hands shaking as she entered her PIN. The screen's light illuminated her tense face. Behind her, Ryan loomed, almost pressed against her back, a thin smile on his lips, eyes glinting with thrill. He raised two fingers in a peace sign and tilted his head toward the camera. As the image froze on that frame, Monroe stepped forward, her voice lowering. "This is the smile California will never forget." The courtroom was deathly silent. Someone gasped softly. A pen dropped, the sound stark against the quiet. In the front row, Margaret Miller gripped her rosary tightly. Judge Hayes leaned forward, studying the screen, his eyes narrowing briefly before opening with a steely gaze. Monroe continued. "Behind him, you can see the second figure, Jason Reed, looking away, keeping watch, ensuring his accomplice could pose." Her voice caught briefly, but remained steady. This wasn't a reflex. This was the pride of crime. The video played in slow motion. At frame 30, the technician zoomed in, Ryan tilting his head, mouth curving, a strange light in his eyes, confident, almost proud. As the image froze, Monroe said softly, almost a whisper, "In this moment, the victim was alive. 5 minutes later, she was dead." And he smiled as he left the scene. On the defense side, Ryan sat upright, unflinching. He watched his own face on the screen, a faint smile playing on his lips, whispering something to Jason. Jason nodded, eyes indifferent. Judge Hayes struck his gavel in warning, but both leaned back, smiles intact. Monroe requested the next set of evidence: shoe prints, shell casings, and phone data. The screen showed an enlarged image of sand-crusted Nike shoes. "These are the prints found at the scene, size 11, she said. When police searched Ryan Cooper's apartment, they recovered matching shoes, down to the wear on the heels. Next came images of 9mm casings, their rifling marks matching the Glock found under his mattress. Not just coincidence, Monroe said. This is the truth. The technician displayed a phone tracking map. Red dots marked the signals of 2 cell phones on July 5, 2008. This is Sarah Miller's path, Monroe pointed. And these are Ryan Cooper's and Jason Reed's. The lines run parallel, converging at the victim's apartment at 1:30 a.m., leaving together at 2:15, and losing signal at Harbor Boulevard, where the body was found. She turned to the jury. There is no doubt they were with her until it ended. In the press row, a young reporter scribbled, "Evidence ties the smiling killers to the screen." In the public gallery, Ventura residents watched, breathless. A middle-aged man whispered to his wife, "If that was my daughter, I couldn't sit still." Monroe faced Jason Reed. "Do you feel shame seeing this?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through. Jason tilted his head, smirking. "Why would I?" A sharp gasp rose from the gallery. Monroe stood still for a moment, her eyes glistening, then turned to the jury. "That's why we're here." Judge Hayes struck his gavel, demanding order. He looked at Jason, then Ryan. Both sat expressionless. He said, his voice low but resonant, "Evil doesn't roar, it smiles." The words landed like a verdict before the actual ruling. The rest of the morning, Monroe presented additional evidence: fingerprints, a hair strand, and a witness who heard laughter after the gunshots. Each time she mentioned the laughter, she paused, letting the jury imagine that sound, the chilling blend of chuckles and gunfire by the sea. At the lunch recess, the crowd spilled into the hallway. Reporters swarmed Monroe with questions. One asked, "Do you think they feel remorse?" Monroe glanced at the courtroom door where Ryan and Jason were being led out, flashes popping. She replied softly, "Remorse is a privilege for those who still know mercy. They don't." That afternoon, the Los Angeles Times published a still of Ryan smiling at the ATM, captioned with Judge Hayes' words, "Evil doesn't roar, it smiles." The image and quote spread across social media, becoming the trial's emblem. One no one wanted to recall but couldn't forget. On the third morning, the courtroom remained packed. The media dubbed it Witness Day, and it was the day those who knew Sarah, who heard or saw, would tell the final parts of a story she could no longer tell. Rachel Morgan, Sarah's roommate, took the stand, her face pale. She gripped her hands, glanced at the reporters below, and took a deep breath. That night, she began voice-catching, "I invited Sarah to watch fireworks at the beach, but she said no." She said, "I've got to study, I have an exam tomorrow." She just wanted to stay home and study. Sarah didn't know that night she'd meet devils. The room fell silent, pen stopped. Rachel continued, voice trembling. "I came home the next morning, the door was open, the light was on. Everything looked like she'd just stepped out. Except she never came back." As she finished, soft sobs echoed from the gallery, and Monroe nodded her thanks. The next witness, Jim Carver, a Harbor Boulevard resident, recounted the early morning of July 6, 2008. He was making coffee when he heard 5 gunshots echo across the sea. "I thought it was fireworks from the 4th, he said, eyes tearing, "but then I heard laughter. Clear as day, men's laughter, young and calm. Not happy laughter, but the kind that chills you. I can still hear it right after the shot stopped." He looked at the defendants. "When I saw the ATM video on the news, I knew that laughter belonged to them." Monroe approached the witness stand, her voice firm. "Mr. Carver, are you certain it was laughter?" He nodded. "I've lived by the sea my whole life. I know how sound carries. No mistake. They laughed right over that girl's body." His words sent a shiver through the courtroom. Monroe faced the jury, opened her file, and read slowly, each word cutting. "They laughed over her body." Her voice wasn't loud, but it rang like a heavy bell in the thick air. She repeated, eyes on the defendants, "They laughed over her body." Ryan's face remained blank. Jason leaned back, a faint smile flickering, gone as quickly as a toxic breeze. Murmurs rose, a few spectators gasped. Judge Hayes struck his gavel 3 times, but no one looked away from Jason. That smile, brief as it was, seared into the minds of those present, the smile of someone who no longer saw humanity in themselves. Another witness, young investigator Ben Torres, took the stand to confirm the crime scene report. He described the first moments at the beach. "We found her lying on her back, eyes slightly open. No signs of struggle, just some sand on her hand. And on the sand nearby, There were shoe prints deeper than normal, as if someone stood there looking down for a long time. I've never forgotten that feeling, like the killer was admiring his work. Hammond, seated behind the prosecution, bowed his head. He knew every detail Ben spoke was true, but hearing it again twisted his stomach. He remembered that morning. The waves, the briny smell, the air choked by emptiness. As Ben stepped down, Monroe stood, nodded to the judge, and said, "Permission to call the final witness, Margaret Miller, the victim's mother." The courtroom grew so still you could hear heartbeats. Margaret rose, walking slowly to the stand, her black dress plain, her silver rosary glinting in her hand. She looked at the killers, her gaze strangely calm. "I'm not here to beg," she said, voice soft but resonant. "I'm here to remind you that my daughter had a name, a life, and people who loved her. Sarah wasn't just a victim, she was a person. And you," she paused, taking a deep breath. "You can smile, but my daughter didn't get the chance." The courtroom erupted in silence. No one spoke, no one moved. Only scattered sobs broke from the gallery. Ryan stayed stone-faced, but Jason, the habitual smiler, briefly looked away, then smirked, a contemptuous twitch, aimed at the pain before him. Judge Hayes struck his gavel, his voice hoarse. "Order in the court, Mrs. Miller, thank you." She nodded, returned to her seat. Tearless, clutching the rosary until her knuckles whitened. As the court recessed, Monroe didn't join the hallway crowd as usual. She sat back, staring blankly at the defendant's bench. In the fading daylight, Ryan and Jason's shadows stretched across the tiles. They smiled, and in those smiles, she saw something deeper than crime. Absolute nothingness, a void without fear, remorse, or need for forgiveness. The trial entered its third week. The courtroom had no empty seats, and the hallways overflowed. Everyone knew today was the day Ryan Cooper would choose to confess, or stay silent and head straight to a death sentence. The media called it the day justice faces evil. Monroe, after sleepless nights, told reporters simply, "Today, we'll hear what no one wants to hear." Ryan was brought in, hands cuffed behind his back. No suit, just a gray prison jumpsuit. Head slightly bowed. Jason Reed sat beside him, calm as ever, tapping the table, his half-smile intact, though his eyes were vacant. Judge Hayes' gavel struck, restoring order. "Defendant Ryan Cooper," he said, voice low, "your counsel indicates you intend to plead guilty to avoid the death penalty. Do you confirm this?" Ryan looked up. "Yes, Your Honor." His voice was hoarse but steady, unshaken. The room was so quiet you could hear reporters' pens scratching. Monroe stepped to the podium, her face expressionless. "Mr. Cooper," she said slowly, each word heavy as lead, "we need to hear it from you. What happened on the night of July 5th, 2008? Ryan took a breath and spoke, his tone chillingly calm. "That night, we were driving around Ventura. Me and Jason didn't have a plan, just bored. Then we saw her through the window, studying, alone. She looked too peaceful." He paused, glanced at Jason, and continued. "I said, let's scare her." Jason laughed, said, "Why not?" We stopped the truck, knocked on the door. He recounted every detail meticulously. He described using the gun to force Sarah into the truck, how they made her withdraw money, and the look in her eyes when she realized it wouldn't stop at robbery. She asked me, "Will you let me go?" I said, "Sure." Then I told Jason to drive to the beach. He smirked, like recalling an old prank. On the way she begged. I didn't hear much, but she cried, then went quiet. At the spot where they found her, she turned to me and said, "Can we pray?" I said, "Sure." We bowed our heads for a few seconds. Then I shot. Jason shot after. Monroe froze, her voice hoarse. "What did you just say?" She prayed. Ryan looked straight at her, eyes empty. She asked us to pray. We did. Then we shot. The courtroom stopped breathing. A reporter dropped a pen, the metal clinking coldly on the floor. Margaret Miller, in the front row, gripped her rosary until the cord nearly snapped. Jurors bowed their heads, unable to look at him. Judge Hayes leaned forward, voice low. "You're saying after praying, you still pulled the trigger. Ryan nodded. Yes, I didn't feel anything. Just quiet. Monroe paused, then asked, why did you keep shooting? Ryan exhaled, shoulders relaxing, as if unburdened. I don't know, Jason said. Let me try. And he shot more. She didn't scream anymore. Jason looked up, lips curling slightly. She was calm, he said softly. Like a breeze passing through. I like that. An angry hiss rose from the gallery. Judge Hayes slammed his gavel. Order! But no one could hide their outrage. Monroe stood still, staring at the two men. She spoke slowly, voice sharper. Mr. Cooper, do you realize what you just described? You described an execution, not a shooting. That girl asked you to pray, and then you killed her. Ryan shrugged. I told you. It was quiet. That's all. She turned to Jason. And you said you liked her calm. Did you know she was calm because she'd accepted her death? Jason met Monroe's gaze, his smirk almost pitying. People die every day. Get used to it. Someone sobbed. A reporter covered their face. The courtroom was silent, save for the rustle of paper as the court clerk recorded every word. Monroe stood tall, facing the entire courtroom, her voice breaking but resolute. This isn't just murder. It's a mockery of humanity. A girl asked to pray, meaning she still believed in kindness, still believed there was a flicker of light, even in evil, but they shot her mid-prayer. Your Honor, this isn't just a crime, it's an insult to every value humanity has ever built. Judge Hayes sat motionless. He removed his glasses, wiping them gently. I've sat on this bench for 30 years, he said slowly. And rarely have I seen something that leaves me speechless. Today I have. Monroe flipped a page in her file, reading Ryan's handwritten statement. We didn't hate her, we just wanted to see what it felt like. She closed the file, her voice hoarse. That is the manifesto of empty evil. Evil, not for money, not for hate, but because it could be. Margaret Miller bowed her head, tears falling for the first time. She didn't sob, only trembled, her hand covering her mouth. Hammond, seated behind the prosecution, felt his chest tighten. He looked up, catching Ryan's gaze, still cold, still empty. Judge Hayes asked one final question. Do you have anything to say to the victim's family before we conclude this testimony? Ryan looked up, staring directly at Margaret. Every eye followed. For a moment, people thought he might apologize. But he only said, she looked peaceful. Margaret's head dropped. The rosary fell to the floor, shattering. Monroe closed her eyes, clenching her fists. A second later, the gavel struck, heavy and lingering like the heartbeat of the courtroom. The trial recessed for 2 days after the chilling confession, but its aftershock enveloped California like a heavy fog. Newspapers, TV, online forums, all fixated on one phrase, prayed, then pulled the trigger. That phrase turned Sarah Miller's case into the most horrific symbol of modern crime. Crime not for money or hatred, but for the emptiness of the soul. When the trial resumed, the front row was reserved for criminal psychologists. Judge Hayes requested they assess the defendant's mental state, as the public kept asking, were these men insane? The first to take the stand was Dr. Evelyn Carter, a former FBI criminal psychologist. Her voice was calm but sharp. I've read all the statements, watched the videos, observed their body language. Neither Ryan nor Jason is mentally ill. They're not disordered. They chose evil. The courtroom stirred. Carter continued, holding a thin file. Ryan Cooper clearly exhibits traits of narcissistic personality disorder, excessive confidence, a craving for recognition, a need for attention. He doesn't lack remorse because he doesn't understand wrong. He believes his crime makes him special. She glanced at Ryan, sitting meters away. What's most terrifying is his belief that he's smarter than the system judging him. Monroe asked, and Jason Reed, Dr. Carter? Carter paused, eyeing the younger man. Jason sat back, face cold as stone. Jason is a textbook psychopath, she said. He lacks the capacity for empathy. When he sees others' pain, He feels nothing, except excitement. She turned to the jury. These two aren't insane. They were fully aware, knew exactly what they were doing, and chose to do it. They chose evil like others choose joy. An older juror nodded slowly, while Monroe jotted a note. As Carter left the stand, she whispered, "Not disordered, chosen." The words echoed in Monroe's mind like an undeniable verdict. Next was Dr. Howard Kim, a sociologist studying young offenders. He spoke evenly, eyes on the public. "We're facing a generation raised in disconnection between emotion and consequence. When Ryan and Jason committed this crime, they didn't think of the victim, because to them, she was just a character in a script they wrote." Monroe interjected, "Dr. Kim, are you saying they saw murder as a game?" "Not a game," Kim replied. "A performance. Both wanted to be seen, remembered. It's the thrill of the social media generation. I exist when others see me." Murder became their ultimate way to prove they exist. Murmurs filled the room. A reporter scribbled, "Generation of spectacle, those who see crime as content." Monroe stepped to the prosecution podium, her voice loud, unmasking her frustration. "Your Honor, this isn't just the Sarah Miller case. It's a mirror of our society, where people start seeing pain as entertainment, where empathy becomes rare." She stared at the defendants. They didn't kill out of hate. They killed out of boredom. And what chills me isn't the gun, but their smiles, the smiles of kids raised in the glow of screens, thinking the world is their stage. Judge Hayes sat silent. He understood Monroe was addressing something beyond the case, something everyone felt but hadn't named. Outside, public outrage exploded. Newspapers ran editorials, "A generation without humanity, the crime of apathy. How did we raise the smiling evil?" Evening talk shows hosted psychologists, philosophers, journalists, priests, all debating. One side argued Ryan and Jason were products of a consumerist society, the internet, and fame culture. The other insisted you couldn't blame the era. Ultimately, every act was a personal choice. In Ventura, people gathered at the beach where Sarah died, placing flowers and writing on a wooden board. She prayed. They smiled. Where were we? While the state debated, the two who caused it all sat in separate cells at Los Angeles County Jail. A guard reported Ryan still enjoyed chatting with officers. "You know, I got a whole state saying my name." He spoke with pride, not remorse. Jason, meanwhile, kept smiling, sometimes staring into a cell mirror. One night, he told a cellmate, "They think I'm a monster, but at least I'm real. I don't fake being good." The next day, Monroe recalled Dr. Carter for further evaluation. "In your opinion," she asked, "can they change?" Carter shook her head. "No. To change, they'd need to know fear. And they fear nothing." Monroe concluded her argument with a statement that silenced the room. "We're facing a generation that sees crime as entertainment, and if we don't face it, don't name it, the smiles of Ryan Cooper and Jason Reed won't be the last. They'll become the new face of our era, the face of those who think being noticed matters more than being human." Judge Hayes leaned back, his eyes slightly clouded behind his glasses. He spoke softly, almost a whisper. "I once thought justice was the line between good and evil. Today, I see that line blurring because the darkness no longer hides, it sits before us, smiling." Outside the courthouse, as the session ended, Los Angeles was unusually gray. A TV station broadcast live commentary on the steps. A young student stood behind, holding a handwritten sign, "We are watching the end of empathy." That night, as people went home, the clip of Ryan saying, "She asked us to pray. We did. Then we shot," replayed on TV, mixed with Ventura's waves in a special report. The anchor's voice was soft. They weren't insane. They weren't afraid. They chose evil, and chose to smile while doing it. Sentencing day. Los Angeles's sky was dull gray, low clouds pulling the city into heavy silence. Outside the courthouse, reporters, TV vans, and citizens packed the steps. Everyone knew today would end the case that shook the state for 2 years. In the courtroom, cold light blazed, every seat filled. No one spoke, no one dared breathe loudly. At the defense table, Ryan Cooper and Jason Reed were led in, hands cuffed, still in gray suits from the trial's start. Ryan walked first, steps slow, eyes never lowering. Jason followed, scanning the room, lips pursed in that familiar smile, the smile in every newscast, every nightmare of those present. Judge Hayes sat at his high bench, setting down a stack of files, taking a deep breath. Before him, prosecutor Linda Monroe stood ready, her black robe crisp, face calm but icy. To the right, Margaret Miller, Sarah's mother, sat in the front row, clutching the silver rosary, now broken from the prior session. Beside her, Lieutenant Hammond stayed silent, eyes fixed on the killers. As the clerk read the final procedures, Hayes looked up, his voice soft but clear. The People's Court of California has heard testimony, evidence, and final words. Today, the court will deliver its sentence. He paused, flipping the judgment page. The room held its breath. Ryan tilted his head toward Jason, lips twitching. Jason caught it, smiling back. A cryptic, empty smile, like two friends about to see the final scene of a movie they starred in. Monroe stood, stepping to the center. Her voice rang firm. Your Honor, for 3 weeks we've heard, seen, endured the words and images of two people who know no fear, no remorse. They killed and smiled. They entered this courtroom and smiled. They looked at a mother's pain and smiled. She paused, staring at the defendants. Now let justice smile last. A murmur rippled through the room. Ryan eyed Monroe, his lips curling slightly, but his gaze held a flicker of unease. Jason leaned back, chuckling softly, as if amused by the challenge. Judge Hayes struck his gavel. For order. He read aloud, the jury has reached a unanimous verdict. Defendants Ryan Cooper and Jason Reed are convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and armed robbery. Considering the severity and their demeanor, the court sentences, he looked up, staring at them. Life imprisonment without parole. The hallway's noise lingered as Judge Hayes called for silence. He remained seated, eyes locked on the defendants. For 3 weeks, he'd witnessed their smiles, the smiles of those who knew no fear. Now, in a room of light and stares, he slowly removed his glasses, his voice hoarse but steady. Before you're taken away, the court has a few words. He looked at Ryan Cooper. You led this, turning violence into a performance. You wanted attention, and you got it. But the light you sought will no longer reach you. Then he turned to Jason Reed, his gaze sharp as a blade. And you, who smiled as blood spilled. I don't care if you smiled for thrill or emptiness. Whatever it was, it's your last smile in this world. He paused, his voice lowering, heavy as another sentence. You found joy in crime. Keep that smile in the dark, for life. The room was deathly still. No one spoke, no one breathed. Ryan bowed his head, hands clenched, while Jason, for the first time since the case began, stopped smiling. The smile faded from his lips, replaced by a dull void. Officers approached, cuffing them. As they stepped down, the chains clinked softly but sharply. Margaret Miller sat in the front row, head bowed. As Ryan passed, she didn't look at him, only whispered something no one heard. Jason glanced at her, then away, his eyes sliding to the floor, as if afraid to meet the faint light in hers. The courtroom doors opened, sunlight poured into the long hallway. Hundreds of cameras waited, reporters jostling to film. But as the defendants emerged, everyone noticed, no more smiles. Jason bowed his head. Ryan stayed silent. The two young figures walked between officers like gray shadows, sinking into the earth. The crowd's jeers echoed, then fell silent as the prison van's door opened. Ryan stepped up first, pausing briefly at the step. For a moment, sunlight hit his face, revealing tired, empty eyes. Jason followed, head down, no smile, no words. As they sat in the back, the door slammed shut. The metal clang reverberated, heavy and cold, like the court's final gavel on their fate. The van started, rolling slowly, leaving behind a sea of cameras and faces, angry, weary, faintly relieved. At the press conference afterward, Linda Monroe appeared. In a black suit, her face stern, but her voice softer than usual. She faced rapid-fire questions. Are you satisfied with the verdict? Do you think they'll regret it? What would you say to the victim's family? Monroe paused amid the flashes, looking at the largest camera, speaking slowly. Justice doesn't smile, it endures. Her words, broadcast across America that evening, became the night's headline. A reporter pressed, Miss Monroe, do you think justice heals? She shook her head slightly. No one can heal death, but today, we made the smile of evil go silent. Outside, rain began to fall, a rare spring shower in California. The crowd dispersed, leaving wet streaks on the courthouse steps. Margaret Miller stepped out slowly, a black shawl around her shoulders. Asked about her feelings, she said, There's no joy in justice, only quiet, and I think Sarah would understand. Then she turned, descending the steps, vanishing into the thin rain. The prison van carrying Ryan and Jason headed to California State Prison. Inside, no one spoke. Jason leaned against the window, watching the rain, lips pursed, no smile left. Ryan stared at his wrist, where the faint RC tattoo lingered, then sighed. He no longer knew why he'd smiled. At the prison gate, the rain grew heavier. Headlights lit the towering steel fence, light scattering like invisible threads, binding them. The gate opened, then closed with a long, echoing screech. Inside, their world was now only concrete, steel, and darkness. That night, national news replayed the final image, the defendants leaving court, unsmiling, the prison van's door slamming. The subtitle read, The Smiling Killers, No Smile Left. Viewers across the country fell silent. Many turned off their TVs mid-broadcast. They couldn't bear the chilling silence. Not of justice, but of humanity drained dry. 10 years after the sentencing, Ventura's sea still sparkled green, its salty breeze unchanged, as if nothing had happened. But for those who lived through the summer of 2008, the city was never peaceful again. At the end of Harbor Boulevard, where Sarah Miller was killed, a small park now blooms with green grass. On the blood-stained ground, the city and her family erected a white marble plaque, etched with a simple, haunting phrase, Kindness never dies. Each July, UCSB students hold a candlelight vigil here, called Light for Sarah. Under a crimson sunset, candles flicker on young faces, people who never knew her, but feel bound to preserve the humanity she lost. Sarah's family still lives in Santa Barbara, in the small house at the end of Olive Street, where Margaret Miller collapsed upon hearing of her daughter's death. After the trial, she avoided the media. Instead, she quietly worked with Sarah's friends to establish the Sarah Miller Foundation, a scholarship for UCSB public health students. Sarah's major. Over 100 students have received it, many becoming doctors, researchers, volunteers. They say, holding their diplomas reminds them of a young woman who believed kindness could save the world. In a 2018 interview, a journalist asked Margaret why she chose that name for the foundation. She smiled gently. I didn't want my daughter's name tied to fear forever. I want people to think of light when they say Sarah Miller, not darkness. She paused, voice softening. As for Ryan and Jason, I've forgiven, but I'll never forget. That same year, California State Prison allowed reporters to film a segment on crime and remorse. In the footage, Ryan Cooper sat quietly in his cell, hair long thinner than before. No smile remained. Asked if he thought about that night, he said, every day and every time. I wonder why I didn't stop. His voice was hoarse, dry, not fully remorseful, but exhausted. The crime had drained the life from the man who once thought himself special. Jason Reed, held a few blocks away, remained mostly silent, per the guards. He kept his old habit, staring into a cell mirror. I saw him smile at himself once, a guard said. Not a happy smile, but one checking if he still exists. Jason still believed he'd done no wrong. In an internal interview, he wrote, I don't regret it. I just wish the world wasn't too weak to handle the truth. When asked about this, Monroe replied briefly, they chose the rest of their lives. Now retired from the prosecutor's office, she teaches law in San Diego. During a filmed student talk, someone asked, Miss Monroe, do you ever forget the Sarah Miller case? She sat silent for a moment, then answered, no. I still see their smiles and the courtroom silence that day. That's when I understood justice doesn't bring victory. It only stops the silence of fear, and when justice is served, it doesn't call for celebration. It sighs and rises. The talk spread across social media. A student commented under the video, some cases make you believe the law can punish. The Sarah Miller case makes us believe it can protect something holier, compassion. Ventura has changed. The small cafe where Sarah studied late was repainted. A sign reading for Sarah added. Along the beach, new lampposts cast light. At sunset, their glow reflects on the waves, like hundreds of candles floating, echoing her first vigil. One July afternoon, Margaret Miller returned to the Memorial Park with young students. They laid flowers by the stone plaque, reading aloud its words, kindness never dies. She sat on a wooden bench, gazing at the sea, whispering, see, Sarah, your kindness is still here. The young people around her bowed their heads, silent. No one spoke more, because none was needed. Elsewhere, in California prison's cold walls, afternoon light slipped through a narrow iron window, falling on Ryan's face. He stared at the tiny sunbeam, and for a moment, his lips twitched. Not a smile, but a flicker of memory, as if recalling something distant, unsure if it was real or a dream. Jason, in his cell across the hall, stared into a mirror. He smiled, then stopped, as if realizing the smile meant nothing without an audience. The steel door slammed behind him, echoing down the corridor, the same sound as the day they left court. Outside, sea breeze blew through the bars, carrying the salt of a freedom they'd never touch again. That year, at the 10th anniversary vigil, Monroe spoke in Ventura. She stood before a sea of candle holders, her voice carrying through the wind. 10 years ago, this place was darkness, but we turned it into light, and though darkness always lingers, light never fades. Not because of a verdict, but because people still choose to believe in good. As the sun sank below the horizon, Ventura's sky blazed red, waves crashed, light scattering like blood mixed with fire. Amid the scene, a TV camera panned slowly to Sarah's white marble plaque, pausing on a new line, etched that year. The light still shines, but some smiles belong to the dark forever. In that silent moment between wind and waves, church bells rang faintly, not to end the story, but to remind that kindness, though gunned down, knows how to rise from pain. The story of Sarah Miller isn't just a tragic 2008 California murder. It's a mirror reflecting cracks in modern American society, where isolation, extreme individualism, and a culture worshiping attention have led some youth to lose the most basic emotion, compassion. Ryan Cooper and Jason Reed didn't kill Sarah out of hatred or greed. They killed out of boredom, curiosity, a need to be seen. They smiled at cameras, in court, and only fell silent when locked in darkness, a terrifying image of a generation swallowed by the need to affirm themselves in a noisy world. Meanwhile, Sarah, the young woman who believed in knowledge and kindness, stood for what's growing rare: faith in humanity, in the value of decency. When she prayed, saying, "Can we pray?" before being shot, it wasn't just the plea of someone facing death. It was a final reminder to the world, even in darkness, we can choose light. From this, Americans today can see that brutality doesn't always stem from poverty or hate. Sometimes, it comes from an inner void, when people live without true connection. Social media turns smiles, suffering, even crime into content for consumption. But if we pause, look into Sarah's eyes, or hear Monroe's words, justice doesn't smile. It endures. We'll understand that America needs more than strong laws. It needs a culture of compassion. Care for each other more, teach children empathy, and remember that kindness, however fragile, is the light that never fades. If you believe kindness can still triumph over darkness, hit subscribe to join us in sharing stories of justice and light in the real world. Thank you for joining us. See you in the next video, where we continue witnessing the power of truth and unquenchable faith.